All right, forecast. Now, take a look at the dollar first, of course. Then, what are we seeing? We are, what I would argue, typical seek and destroy conditions right here. So, what we mentioned right yesterday was this is looking like a sweep of that premium array. So, that is where we can also continue lower from. And we had an ST being created as well. Then, the opposing liquidity right there would be the target eventually. Now, what we're seeing right here is that we are again coming below that discount rate from that swing low, and we are sweeping it again. So here we are not respecting fair value gaps, which indicates that we are currently in seek and destroy conditions. So here I simply want to be careful. The best way to approach this would be just to wait for 4-hour order flow to be confirmed again. So if we get new fair value gaps lower on the 4-hour right there, perfect, then we can look to continue lower. If we get this ST that we have and we trade back into it, for example, and we create new 4-hour fair value gap higher off of that, then I would still want to look for higher prices as well. So it is being a bit more careful right here. Let's take a quick look at the weekly. Did create or is creating a very small fair value gap. All right, now with that in mind, let's look at ES and NASDAQ, which I do believe that they can still continue higher right here. Only thing I do not like is that the ES or that ES did not create a daily fair value gap higher right there. So that is of course also a little bit of a shame, but other than that, it is not too bad, and I do still think we can still look to continue higher. It is mainly waiting here for the fair value gap to show its hand and see what they actually want to do right there. Because currently it looks like it did create a very nice turn in the market, and we could actually continue lower a bit. NASDAQ. NASDAQ is tricky. And the reason it's tricky is because it reached the all-time high. And when it reaches an all-time high like that, you need to be very careful. That's the same with YM, that we are not sweeping that all-time high right there. Because a lot of times price does tend to sweep all-time highs instead of just continuing higher right there. So if we do want to continue higher, then I'm looking at a fair value gap to continue higher off of. For example, if the daily fair value gap wants to be created right there, potentially even next week a weekly fair value gap. But currently, this is looking like one big sweep right there. So here's the same story as on ES. I want to wait for a little bit more fair value gaps to tell me, all right, do we actually want to continue higher or continue lower here after that sweep right there? Now, on YM, it's the same story, and we're also sweeping an all-time high. Here, it does not seem like we currently want to continue higher. So it is a lot of waiting right here, a lot of waiting where I want to be sure, all right, do we actually still want to continue higher or continue lower? If you're trading flow trading plan, this is where the 1 hour and the 15 minutes will simply said guide you. Will simply said, if it wants to continue higher, create bullish fair value gaps. If it wants to continue lower, bearish fair value gaps right there. Same on NASDAQ, same on ES. So let the 15 minute and the 1 hour right there guide you to see if it still wants to continue higher or continue lower. Then on DAX, let's see, on the 4 hour, we reached the first target. Now, currently this is the same as an all-time high, as in if we were to close above an all-time high like this, that is perfect, right? Because that indicates that we are not sweeping it and we can actually look to continue higher off of that as well. So here, I would expect higher prices to now this new target in form of this target right there in the form of that high. So looking at Australian dollar, US dollar right here, this is as well in seek and short conditions, and I'm not too certain on what it wants to do right there. Simply said, because the dollar is also seek and destroy, so I do not necessarily want to get involved right here. Not too clear to me. I do not really trust this ST going lower as well. It's not something I would want to get involved in. EU right here, of course, exactly the same as the dollar, where it's just simply in seek and destroy conditions. If we get off of this 4 hour fair value gap lower right there, a new 4 hour fair value gap lower right there, then I will still be bearish. But overall, these are first indications that we are indeed in seek and short conditions. So we need to be careful with that as well. GU is exact same thing, as in I don't want to get involved, and it's still the same story that we had as well. New Zealand dollar, US dollar, where it is also very, very similar. I don't want to do anything right here. US dollar, Canadian dollar. If the dollar wants to continue higher, then US dollar, Canadian dollar right here could as well be quite interesting. If we are looking at the weekly being overtaken, because we currently had the rejection already of the weekly order block right there. Since we already had the rejection and we create a new daily value gap higher right there, that could definitely be interesting to continue higher off of that as well. It's definitely something to keep in mind. Definitely looks interesting. US dollar CHF, again, nothing interesting here in my opinion. Still in the same exact situation. Don't really want to do anything here. US dollar JPY. This looked very promising, but it's not looking that promising anymore. And since we are not continuing higher off the first value gap right there, we're now coming into those value gaps again right there. I would almost argue that either we get a new daily value gap higher already and we continue higher off of that, or we come into the overlapping part right there. In the meantime, I do not want to do anything, and I'm also going to move this to the waiting list instead of the long list. Silver has been continuing higher as well. You can potentially look to create the daily ST right there to trade higher off of that. In the meantime, it's just very simple actually. It's just that the dollar is now creating those seek and destroy conditions right there, because this was looking very promising. But after sweeping both the highs and the lows, not respecting fair value gaps, that of course is a sign of seek and destroy, and we saw it coming. Well, I didn't see the seek and destroy conditions coming, but we did get a great indication that the dollar did not want it to continue higher after sweeping that high right there and creating an early ST already. So that was very suspicious. It's not something I would want to see. So on gold as well, it's the same story. Seek and destroy, don't want to do anything. Looking at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is still in that battle, so I'm still waiting for a daily fair value gap right here. Crude oil, let's see. Crude oil is slowly, steadily climbing higher. Very ugly price action overall though. Not nice. Simply said, I don't want to do anything. I want to wait for the monthly value gap then. If we get a daily value gap higher in the meantime, could be interesting, but I want to wait. Nifty actually a very hefty retracement going higher. We do leave behind a daily value gap right there, but this is quite a hefty retracement and I do not really like to see that. So if we still want to continue lower, I would want a little bit more confirmation again right there. Then if we go to the short list, Euro, New Zealand dollar, we actually played out very nicely right here. I missed this move. I did not get involved, unfortunately. But of that 4 hour value gap right there, reaching the target was a very, very nice short little trade. So if you manage to get involved, then great stuff, because that was a beautiful trade. Let's look at it really quickly. 4 hour value gap right there, continuing lower, creating overall usual context in the unusual context. 5-minute ST, 5-minute RE as well, right there, eventually continue lower. Asia major, so entering in Asia is perfectly fine as well. Very, very nice price action overall. Looks really, really clean. All right, moving on to the long list. By the way, Euro New Zealand dollar here is then done for me as well. It's not interesting anymore, and I do not want to get involved again. I'm putting this on the breakdown list. For the longs, Canadian dollar JPY. So yesterday evening, it was quite interesting because I remember yesterday during a live session, I mentioned this is so obvious that it actually wants to continue higher to this drawn liquidity right there. And once we create a 4 hour value gap right there, we just had an extremely aggressive move lower. And that, of course, is not something you would want to see if you are expecting higher prices. So at that moment in time, I had my alert set actually to look for potential entry. We never got it. The alert never went off. The 15-minute SD right there is nothing interesting to me. And eventually we just dropped lower. So here, this is also not something I am currently interested in. And I simply would want to wait. Don't really want to do anything. I'm going to put it on the breakdown list. Australian dollar, Canadian dollar. So let's see. On the 4 hour, we finally got a new move higher as well with news, of course. Now tomorrow and Friday, we don't really have news supporting the ID. So this is not super interesting to me anymore. It's just a matter of fact that we didn't really have news supporting the ID, the idea of trading this week, as in the Australian dollar, Canadian dollar. Australian dollar and Canadian dollar was only particular one day where we actually had new supporting ID. So maybe next week, if we have the news, it could be interesting again. But for tomorrow and Friday, I am not interested in this, and I'm going to put it on the breakdown list as well. Waiting list: EU, US dollar, Canadian dollar can be interesting, but still waiting. Euro, Australian dollar, consolidating. So I'm also going to move this actually to the breakdown list right there. Even though we have a 4-hour VWAP gap higher, again, loyalty test. Can you trust that? Not exactly, right? It's not something you would want to trust right there, even if that 4-hour VWAP gap already failed as well. Euro JPY, also consolidating. I'm also going to put this on the breakdown list. GBP New Zealand dollar, also consolidating right here. Don't really want to do anything. Also going to put it on the breakdown list. US dollar JPY can potentially still be interesting, but I want to wait right here as well. So where we in the beginning of the week had potentially high probability conditions, we had a short, very short period of high probability conditions. This is exactly the time where I would want to take a step back again. And that's very important because at the beginning of the week, we actually had a few moments on indices, of course, reaching all-time highs like the NASDAQ or the YM as well. And as well, US dollar JPY, which had a few moments, EU as well, what we're seeing right there, that move lower was very high probability. After that, it just does not do what we would want it to do. As in, if it wants to continue lower, I would want to see this high get respected right there and not get swept right there and not traded above. We should have respected overall fair value area and the fair value gaps lower right there, which we are not seeing. So it's important to understand, and my conclusion right there, what I want to tell you is that it could be a time to take a step back as well, knowing when to get involved and knowing when to take a step back. That is very important to understand. All right, thank you.